The morning
This
light
evening is
filtered through the
truly
tall windows
magical,
of
isn't
Kensington
it?
Palace as
Absolutely, and
Catherine,
you're making it even
Princess of
more
Wales,
special.
stood before her wardrobe, carefully considering her options for the evening ahead. Tonight would mark one of the most significant state banquets of the year, welcoming the President of South Korea and his delegation to Buckingham Palace. The weight of the occasion pressed gently on her shoulders as she ran her fingers along the fabric of several elegant gowns, each one representing not just fashion, but diplomacy, tradition, and the careful balance of royal protocol. Catherine had attended dozens of state banquets since joining the royal family, but each one still required meticulous preparation. Tonight's dinner would host over 150 distinguished guests from both nations, including government ministers, cultural leaders, business executives, and members of the diplomatic corps. The banquet hall at Buckingham Palace would be transformed into a glittering display of British hospitality, with the finest china, crystal, and silverware adorning tables that stretched the length of the magnificent room. As she selected a stunning navy blue gown with intricate beadwork that caught the light beautifully, Catherine reflected on the significance of these diplomatic gatherings. State banquets were far more than formal dinners. They represented centuries of British tradition and served as crucial opportunities to strengthen international relationships. Every detail, from the seating arrangements to the menu selection, had been planned months in advance by a team of palace staff working tirelessly to ensure perfection. The Princess of Wales understood her role in these events extended beyond simply looking elegant and making polite conversation. She served as a cultural ambassador, helping to bridge differences between nations through genuine human connection. Her background in art history often provided common ground with international visitors, and her natural warmth had earned her respect from diplomats and world leaders across the globe. Meanwhile, across London, the Buckingham Palace staff were putting the finishing touches on preparations that had begun at dawn. The state dining room was being transformed into a masterpiece of formal presentation. Florists arranged elaborate centerpieces featuring seasonal British flowers mixed with blooms that held special significance for South Korea, creating a visual representation of the friendship between the two nations. The palace's most treasured pieces were being carefully polished and positioned, including priceless artworks, ceremonial objects, and the famous Grand Service, a magnificent collection of silver-gilt plates, and serving pieces that had been used for state occasions since the reign of George IV. In the palace kitchens, a team of chefs led by the royal chef worked with military precision to prepare a menu that would honor both British culinary traditions and Korean tastes. The evening's feast would include perfectly prepared British lamb, fresh Scottish salmon, and an array of seasonal vegetables sourced from the finest producers across the United Kingdom. Each dish would be plated with artistic precision and served simultaneously to all 150 guests, a logistical feat that required split-second timing and flawless coordination. Back at Kensington Palace, Catherine reviewed her briefing notes one final time. These documents contained essential information about each guest she would meet, including their backgrounds, interests, and any topics of conversation that might resonate with them. She paid particular attention to the Korean delegation, studying the cultural nuances that would help her connect meaningfully with the visitors. Her years of experience had taught her that genuine interest in others' cultures and achievements made far more impact than mere pleasantries. Prince William was already at Buckingham Palace, participating in the final security briefings and greeting protocols with his father, King Charles III. The three senior royals would work together throughout the evening to ensure every guest felt welcomed and valued. Their coordinated approach to hosting had been refined over years of working together, with each family member understanding their unique role in creating an atmosphere of warmth and dignity. As afternoon turned to evening, Catherine began her preparation routine with the help of her trusted styling team. Her hair was arranged in an elegant updo that would showcase the magnificent sapphire and diamond tiara she would wear, a piece from the royal collection that had been specially selected for its historical significance and stunning beauty. The tiara had been worn by previous generations of royal women at similar occasions, creating a tangible link between past and present that added depth and meaning to the evening's ceremonies. The process of preparing for a state banquet was itself a carefully choreographed event. Every element of Catherine's appearance would be photographed and analyzed by fashion experts, royal watchers, and international media. Her choice of jewelry, the style of her hair, even the shade of her lipstick would be interpreted as potential diplomatic messages. This level of scrutiny might have been overwhelming for some, but Catherine had learned to embrace the responsibility, understanding that her presentation reflected not just personal taste but national pride. As she applied the finishing touches to her makeup, Catherine thought about the evening's potential for unexpected moments. State banquets, despite their formal structure, often produced spontaneous interactions that became memorable highlights. Perhaps a guest would share a particularly moving story, or a moment of genuine laughter would break through the formal atmosphere. These human connections were what made the elaborate protocols worthwhile, transforming diplomatic duty into meaningful relationship building. The royal dresser carefully helped Catherine into her gown, ensuring every seam lay perfectly and every detail was flawless. The navy blue fabric seemed to capture and reflect light in subtle waves, creating an effect that was both elegant and dynamic. The intricate beadwork told its own story, with patterns that suggested both British heritage and contemporary sophistication. When paired with her sapphire jewelry, the overall effect was nothing short of magnificent. Meanwhile, guests were already beginning to arrive at Buckingham Palace, their cars forming an impressive procession along the mall. Distinguished visitors from both nations emerged from their vehicles wearing their finest formal attire, creating a kaleidoscope of cultural fashion traditions. Korean guests wore elegant combinations of traditional and contemporary styles, while British attendees displayed the refined formality that had become synonymous with royal occasions. The palace staff moved with practiced efficiency, greeting each guest and guiding them through the elaborate protocol of a state banquet arrival. Security personnel, dressed in formal attire that made them nearly invisible, maintained watchful vigilance while allowing the atmosphere to remain relaxed and welcoming. Every detail had been anticipated and planned for, from the placement of coat check stations to the timing of photographic opportunities. Inside the palace, the state dining room had been transformed into a vision of understated magnificence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables set with geometrical precision, where every glass, plate, and piece of silverware occupied its designated position. The sight was breathtaking even to palace staff who had witnessed countless such occasions. Tonight's setting represented the culmination of British hospitality traditions refined over centuries of royal entertaining. King Charles III made his final inspection of the arrangements, noting with approval how seamlessly everything had come together. His years of experience hosting international visitors had taught him to appreciate the countless small details that created an atmosphere of effortless elegance. From the perfect temperature of the room to the subtle background music that would accompany the pre-dinner reception, every element worked in harmony to create an unforgettable experience. As Catherine's car approached Buckingham Palace, she felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and responsibility that always accompanied these grand occasions. Through the vehicle's windows, she could see the crowds of well-wishers and photographers who had gathered to witness the spectacle of a state banquet. Their enthusiasm reminded her that these events captured public imagination precisely because they represented something larger than individual personalities. They embodied the continuation of traditions that connected present-day Britain with its rich historical heritage. The Princess of Wales took a deep breath as her car pulled into the palace courtyard, preparing herself for an evening that would combine careful protocol with spontaneous human interaction. She had no way of knowing that before the night was over, she would create a moment that would be remembered and discussed for years to come, a perfect example of how genuine warmth and quick thinking could elevate a formal occasion into something truly special. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the evening's drama was about to begin. What started as careful preparation for diplomatic duty would soon transform into an evening filled with unexpected delights, meaningful connections, and a particular moment that would showcase Catherine's natural ability to balance royal dignity with authentic human warmth. The state banquet was ready to begin, and, with it, an evening that would exceed everyone's expectations. Catherine stepped out of her car into the illuminated courtyard of Buckingham Palace, her navy gown catching the lights in a shimmer of sophisticated elegance. The click of photographers' cameras created a steady rhythm as she made her way up the red carpet, but her attention was focused on the evening ahead rather than the media attention surrounding her arrival. Palace staff members bowed respectfully as she passed, their faces reflecting the pride they felt in serving during such prestigious occasions. The Princess of Wales moved through the palace corridors with the confident grace that had become her signature, acknowledging staff members with warm smiles and brief words of appreciation for their hard work. These moments of genuine connection with the people who made royal events possible had endeared her to palace employees at every level, from senior courtiers to kitchen assistants who had worked tirelessly to prepare for tonight's banquet. As she entered the private royal apartments where the family would gather before greeting their guests, Catherine found Prince William adjusting his white tie and decorations in front of an ornate mirror. The sight of her husband in full formal regalia never failed to remind her of the weight of history they carried together. His military medals and royal insignia told the story of service and dedication that defined their approach to public duty. Their brief private conversation covered last-minute details about the evening's proceedings, but underneath the practical discussion lay years of shared experience in navigating these grand occasions. They had developed an almost telepathic understanding during formal events, able to support each other through subtle glances and nearly imperceptible gestures that helped them present a united front while maintaining individual authenticity. King Charles III joined them moments later, resplendent in his formal evening, were complete with the Order of the Garter decorations that symbolized his role as sovereign. His presence brought with it decades of experience in international diplomacy and royal protocol. The three of them formed a formidable team, each bringing unique strengths to the complex dance of state entertainment. Charles provided gravitas and historical knowledge, William offered contemporary relevance and military bearing, while Catherine contributed warmth and cultural sophistication. Their final briefing covered the evening's timeline and any last-minute adjustments to protocols. The Korean delegation had arrived safely and were already mingling in one of the palace's reception rooms, accompanied by British officials and other distinguished guests. Early reports suggested the atmosphere was relaxed and positive, with guests expressing genuine excitement about experiencing a traditional British state banquet. As the royal family made their way toward the reception area, Catherine mentally reviewed the guest list one more time. She particularly looked forward to meeting Dr. Kim Soo-jin, a renowned Korean art historian whose work on Asian influences in European decorative arts had revolutionized scholarly understanding of cultural exchange during the 18th century. Their shared passion for art history promised to provide rich material for conversation throughout the evening. The first reception took place in the Blue Drawing Room, where guests were invited to enjoy champagne and canapes while admiring some of the palace's most treasured artworks. The room itself was a masterpiece of royal decoration, with its distinctive blue silk wall coverings and magnificent chandelier, creating an atmosphere of refined elegance. Conversations flowed in multiple languages as diplomats, business leaders, and cultural figures found common ground despite their diverse backgrounds. Catherine moved through the crowd with practiced ease, spending meaningful time with each group of guests while maintaining awareness of the overall flow of the reception. Her genuine interest in learning about Korean culture led to fascinating discussions about everything from traditional pottery techniques to contemporary Korean cinema's growing international influence. These conversations would prove invaluable later in the evening when more formal diplomatic discussions would benefit from the personal connections being established. The Korean First Lady, elegant in a stunning hanbok-inspired gown that beautifully blended traditional and contemporary design elements, engaged Catherine in an extended discussion about cultural preservation in rapidly modernizing societies. Both women shared concerns about maintaining authentic traditions while embracing beneficial changes, finding unexpected parallels between British and Korean experiences in balancing heritage with progress. Meanwhile, Prince William was deep in conversation with members of the Korean business delegation, discussing trade opportunities and technological collaboration between the two nations. His questions demonstrated genuine understanding of Korea's remarkable economic transformation and its emergence as a global leader in technology and innovation. These substantive discussions laid groundwork for future diplomatic and commercial relationships. King Charles III commanded the center of one group, sharing stories about previous state visits and the evolution of British-Korean relations over the decades. His encyclopedic knowledge of royal history and international affairs provided context that helped guests understand the significance of current diplomatic achievements. Several Korean officials expressed amazement at his detailed knowledge of their country's cultural traditions and historical milestones. As the reception continued, palace staff moved seamlessly through the crowd, ensuring glasses remained filled and that every guest felt attended to without being overwhelmed by service. The careful choreography of a royal reception required split-second timing and flawless coordination, with staff members communicating through nearly invisible signals to maintain the illusion of effortless hospitality. The evening's first surprise came when a young Korean violinist, part of the cultural delegation, was invited to perform a brief piece that blended traditional Korean melodies with classical European composition techniques. Her performance created a moment of shared appreciation that transcended language barriers and cultural differences. Catherine was visibly moved by the music, and her enthusiastic applause encouraged other guests to express their admiration more openly. Photography during the reception was carefully managed to capture the spirit of international friendship while respecting protocols about which conversations could be documented. The official palace photographer worked discreetly to record meaningful interactions that would later serve as historical documentation of this diplomatic milestone. These images would appear in newspapers around the world, but, more importantly, they would become part of the permanent record of British-Korean relations. As the time approached for the formal procession to dinner, Catherine noticed one of the Korean dignitaries seemed slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the surroundings. Drawing on her experience as a hostess, she approached the gentleman with a warm smile and began a conversation about his impressions of London. Her natural ability to make others feel comfortable in potentially intimidating situations had been honed through years of similar encounters. The gentleman, revealed to be a prominent Korean educator, shared his amazement at the palace's art collection and expressed particular interest in the British approach to preserving historical artifacts while making them accessible to contemporary audiences. Catherine's knowledge of museum practices and cultural preservation provided exactly the right common ground, and soon they were engaged in an animated discussion that drew in several other guests. This conversation would later be remembered as a perfect example of Catherine's diplomatic style, genuine interest combined with substantive knowledge, delivered with warmth that made formal occasions feel personally meaningful. Her ability to transform protocol-driven interactions into authentic human connections had become one of her most valuable contributions to royal diplomacy. The formal announcement that dinner was ready to be served brought the reception to an elegant conclusion. Guests began forming the processional order that would take them into the state dining room, where the evening's main event awaited. The transition from reception to dinner was choreographed with military precision, yet managed to feel natural and unhurried. Catherine took her designated position in the processional, flanked by senior Korean officials whose earlier nervousness had been replaced by obvious enjoyment of the evening's proceedings. The success of the reception had created an atmosphere of genuine warmth that promised to carry through the remainder of the banquet. As they prepared to enter the dining room, Catherine felt confident that the careful preparation and genuine human connections established during the reception had created the perfect foundation for an extraordinary evening. The double doors to the state dining room opened to reveal a sight that never failed to take guests' breath away, regardless of how many similar occasions they had attended. Tonight's setting represented the pinnacle of British formal entertaining, but it was the warmth and authenticity of the human connections already established that would make this banquet truly memorable. The stage was set for an evening that would exceed diplomatic expectations and create lasting memories for everyone present. The state dining room at Buckingham Palace revealed itself in all its magnificent splendor as the processional guests entered through the grand doorway. Catherine felt the familiar thrill of witnessing this transformation, where centuries of British royal tradition materialized in crystal, gold, and candlelight. The room seemed to pulse with history. Yet tonight, it would create new memories that would join the countless diplomatic triumphs that had unfolded within these walls. The tables stretched before them like works of art themselves, each place setting a masterpiece of precision and elegance. The famous grand service gleamed under the warm light of multiple chandeliers, while carefully arranged floral centerpieces provided bursts of color without overwhelming the sophisticated palette of gold, crystal, and pristine white linens. Every guest paused momentarily upon entering, visibly moved by the sheer beauty of their surroundings. Catherine was seated between the Korean ambassador and Dr. Kim Soo-jin, the art historian she had been eager to meet. The placement was no accident. Palace protocol officers had crafted seating arrangements designed to foster meaningful conversations that would enhance diplomatic relationships while ensuring each guest felt valued and engaged. The Korean president occupied the place of honor beside King Charles III, while Prince William was positioned to facilitate discussions with key business and cultural leaders. As guests found their assigned places, Catherine took a moment to appreciate the careful thought that had gone into every detail of the evening. The menu cards, written in elegant calligraphy in both English and Korean, lay beside each place, setting along with small gifts that honored Korean cultural traditions while showcasing British craftsmanship. These thoughtful touches demonstrated the respect and attention that characterized the best royal hospitality. The first course arrived with clockwork precision. Each of the 150 servings presented simultaneously by white-gloved staff who had trained extensively for this moment. The Scottish salmon, prepared with subtle flavors that complemented rather than masked its natural taste, was accompanied by seasonal vegetables that showcased the finest British produce. Conversations around the table began tentatively, but soon gained momentum as guests discovered shared interests and common ground. Catherine's discussion with Dr. Kim proved immediately engaging, as they explored the fascinating connections between Korean ceramics and British pottery traditions of the 18th century. The art historian's insights into cultural exchange through decorative arts provided Catherine with new perspectives on pieces in the royal collection that she had studied extensively. Their conversation drew in the Korean ambassador, who contributed observations about how cultural diplomacy could bridge political differences. The atmosphere throughout the dining room was notably warm and animated, with laughter punctuating the more serious diplomatic discussions. King Charles III was in his element, drawing on decades of international experience to guide conversations that moved seamlessly between serious policy matters and lighter cultural observations. His genuine curiosity about Korean achievements in technology and environmental innovation sparked enthusiastic responses from the visiting delegation. Prince William had engaged a group of younger Korean officials in discussions about conservation efforts, finding common ground in their shared concerns about climate change and sustainable development. His passionate advocacy for environmental protection resonated strongly with Korean guests who had witnessed their country's commitment to green technology and renewable energy initiatives. These substantive conversations demonstrated how personal interests could enhance diplomatic relationships. As the evening progressed through multiple courses, Catherine noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The initial formality was giving way to genuine warmth as guests from both nations discovered unexpected connections and shared values. The Korean First Lady had begun sharing stories about her work and education, while British officials contributed insights about their own experiences in promoting international academic exchange. The main course featured perfectly prepared British lamb accompanied by an array of seasonal vegetables that celebrated the diversity of British agriculture. Each dish was a work of culinary art, plated with precision that would have impressed even the most demanding restaurant critics. Yet the food, magnificent as it was, served primarily as a backdrop for the human connections being forged around each table. Catherine found herself particularly moved by a conversation with a young Korean entrepreneur who had built a successful business promoting cultural exchange through digital platforms. The woman's passion for bringing people together across cultural boundaries reminded Catherine of her own commitment to using her position to foster understanding and connection. Their discussion attracted several other guests, creating an impromptu symposium on the power of technology to bridge cultural differences. The wine service throughout the evening showcased carefully selected British and international wines that complemented each course, while honoring both British and Korean tastes. Sommeliers moved discreetly through the room, ensuring glasses remained filled while monitoring the subtle ways that fine wine enhanced the evening's conversations. The attention to detail in every aspect of service reflected the pride that palace staff took in representing British hospitality at its finest. As dessert was served, an exquisite creation that incorporated traditional British flavors with subtle nods to Korean culinary traditions, Catherine became aware that something special was developing. The energy in the room had transcended typical diplomatic politeness and evolved into something approaching genuine celebration. Guests were exchanging contact information, making plans for future collaborations, and expressing authentic appreciation for the evening's experiences. King Charles III rose to deliver the evening's formal toasts, his words carefully crafted to honor both the visiting delegation and the strong relationship between Britain and South Korea. His speech touched on shared values, mutual respect, and the promising future of bilateral cooperation. The Korean president's response was equally eloquent, expressing gratitude for British hospitality while emphasizing his country's commitment to strengthening ties between the two nations. These formal speeches represented the diplomatic climax of the evening, but Catherine sensed that the most memorable moments were still to come. The combination of excellent food, magnificent surroundings, and genuine human connection had created an atmosphere ripe for spontaneous gestures that would elevate the occasion beyond mere protocol. She could feel anticipation building around the room as guests prepared for the evening's conclusion. The final toast brought all 150 guests to their feet in a moment of shared celebration that seemed to capture everything positive about international diplomacy. Crystal glasses caught the light as they were raised in salute, creating sparkles that danced across the room like stars. The sight was breathtakingly beautiful, but, more importantly, it represented genuine goodwill between nations and cultures. As the formal dinner portion of the evening concluded, guests began to transition toward the ballroom where coffee and after-dinner entertainment would continue the celebration. This movement created opportunities for more intimate conversations and personal connections that would extend the evening's diplomatic success. Catherine felt energized by the obvious success of the banquet and looked forward to the informal interactions that would follow. The transition from dining room to ballroom provided a natural break in the evening's formal structure, creating space for the unexpected moments that often became the most memorable aspects of state occasions. Catherine moved through the crowd with renewed energy, sensing that the best of the evening was yet to come. Her instincts would prove remarkably accurate, as the next phase of the banquet would provide the perfect setting for a spontaneous gesture that would capture international attention and demonstrate the authentic warmth that made royal diplomacy so effective. The movement into the ballroom created a subtle shift in the evening's energy, as the formal structure of the dinner gave way to more relaxed socializing. Catherine walked alongside her new acquaintances from the Korean delegation, their earlier conversations about art and culture having established genuine connections that transcended diplomatic necessity. The ballroom itself, with its soaring ceilings and magnificent chandeliers, provided a more spacious setting where guests could move freely and form new conversational clusters. Coffee service had been arranged at elegant stations throughout the room, accompanied by an assortment of petit fours and traditional British sweets that showcased the palace pastry team's exceptional skills. Korean guests expressed particular delight at the attention to detail in these final culinary presentations, noting how even the smallest elements of the evening reflected careful consideration of their comfort and enjoyment. Catherine noticed that several of the younger Korean delegates seemed somewhat overwhelmed by the grandeur of their surroundings, despite their obvious enjoyment of the evening's proceedings. Drawing on her natural instinct for hospitality, she approached a group of graduate students who were part of the cultural exchange program, introducing herself with the warm informality that had become her diplomatic trademark. The students, initially nervous about speaking with the Princess of Wales, quickly found themselves at ease as Catherine's genuine interest in their studies and experiences became apparent. She asked thoughtful questions about their research projects, their impressions of British academic institutions, and their hopes for future collaboration between British and Korean universities. Her ability to make formal occasions feel personal had once again transformed potential awkwardness into meaningful connection. One young woman, studying traditional textile arts, became particularly animated when describing her research into the historical connections between Korean silk weaving and British tapestry traditions. Catherine's knowledge of decorative arts provided perfect common ground, and soon they were deep in discussion about the ways cultural exchange had influenced artistic development in both countries. Other guests, drawn by the obvious enthusiasm of the conversation, began gathering around them. Prince William, observing from across the room, smiled at his wife's natural ability to create these spontaneous moments of connection. He had witnessed countless examples of Catherine's gift for making others feel comfortable and valued, but it never ceased to impress him how effortlessly she transformed formal occasions into opportunities for authentic human interaction. Her approach to royal duties had become a model for modern diplomacy. King Charles III was engaged in his own animated discussion with Korean business leaders, exploring opportunities for increased trade and investment between the two countries. His decades of experience in international relations allowed him to navigate complex economic and political topics while maintaining the evening's celebratory atmosphere. The success of the banquet was evident in the quality of these substantial conversations that went far beyond mere pleasantries. The evening's entertainment began with a brief performance by the Korean Cultural Academy Choir, whose voices filled the ballroom with hauntingly beautiful traditional melodies that seemed to transform the very air around them. The music created a moment of shared appreciation that transcended language and cultural barriers, bringing guests together in quiet contemplation of artistic beauty. Catherine was visibly moved by the performance, her appreciation evident in her focused attention and enthusiastic applause. As the choir concluded their presentation, something unexpected began to develop. The young Korean textile researcher, emboldened by Catherine's genuine interest in her work and encouraged by the evening's warm atmosphere, approached the princess with what appeared to be a modest proposal. Speaking softly but with growing confidence, she explained that she had brought a small gift, a traditional Korean silk scarf that she had woven herself, incorporating patterns that reflected both Korean heritage and British influences. Catherine's response to this generous gesture would become the evening's most memorable moment. Rather than simply accepting the gift with polite thanks, she asked the young woman to explain the significance of the patterns and the traditional techniques used in creating the piece. As the explanation unfolded, Catherine's fascination with the artistic process became obvious to everyone nearby, drawing more guests into the expanding circle of conversation. What happened next surprised even Catherine herself. Inspired by the young woman's obvious pride in her traditional craft and moved by the personal significance of the handmade gift, Catherine made a spontaneous decision that would capture international attention. She asked if the young woman would be willing to demonstrate how the scarf might be worn in traditional Korean fashion, expressing genuine desire to honor the cultural significance of the gift she had received. The request created a moment of delighted surprise among the Korean guests, who recognized the gesture as far more significant than mere politeness. For a member of the British royal family to ask for instruction in Korean cultural traditions demonstrated exactly the kind of mutual respect and genuine interest that made diplomatic relationships meaningful. The young woman, initially flustered by the attention, soon warmed to the opportunity to share her cultural heritage. What followed was an impromptu cultural exchange that perfectly captured the spirit of international friendship. The young Korean woman carefully demonstrated the traditional way of draping and securing the silk scarf, explaining the symbolic meanings behind different styling choices and the occasions when various approaches might be appropriate. Catherine listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and clearly enjoying the opportunity to learn something entirely new. Prince William, recognizing the significance of the moment, moved closer to observe the informal lesson, his presence lending additional importance to the cultural exchange. King Charles III, drawn by the obvious enthusiasm surrounding the interaction, also approached the growing group of observers. The three senior royals standing together to learn about Korean textile traditions created a powerful visual representation of genuine cultural curiosity and respect. The demonstration attracted photographers, who captured images that would later appear in newspapers around the world. But, more importantly, the moment attracted other Korean guests who began sharing their own insights into the cultural significance of traditional textiles. What had begun as a simple gift exchange was evolving into an impromptu symposium on Korean cultural traditions. Catherine's willingness to be taught, rather than simply acknowledged, demonstrated the authentic humility that had made her such an effective cultural ambassador. Her obvious enjoyment of learning something new encouraged other guests to share their own areas of expertise, creating a ripple effect of cultural exchange that energized the entire ballroom. The Korean First Lady, observing the scene with obvious pleasure, approached the group to add her own insights into the historical significance of textile traditions in Korean society. Her participation elevated the moment from personal exchange to diplomatic significance, as two nations' representatives engaged in genuine cultural learning that went far beyond formal protocol. As the informal lesson continued, Catherine found herself genuinely moved by the generosity and pride of the Korean guests who had opened their cultural traditions to her curiosity. The experience reminded her why these state occasions were so important. They provided opportunities for human connection that made abstract diplomatic relationships personally meaningful. The success of the evening was no longer measured in protocol achievements, but in the authentic bonds being formed between individuals from different cultures. The moment was building towards something even more special, though none of the participants could have anticipated how this spontaneous cultural exchange would capture global attention and become a defining example of modern royal diplomacy at its finest. The atmosphere in the ballroom had transformed into something magical as Catherine, now wearing the beautiful Korean silk scarf draped in traditional style, moved gracefully through the crowd of delighted guests. The spontaneous cultural exchange had created exactly the kind of authentic moment that made state banquets memorable long after the formal speeches were forgotten. Her willingness to embrace Korean traditions had touched something deep in the hearts of the visiting delegation. What happened next would elevate the evening from diplomatic success to international sensation. The young textile artist, overwhelmed by Catherine's genuine appreciation for her craft and encouraged by the warm response from other guests, made another unexpected request. She asked if Catherine might be willing to participate in a traditional Korean gesture of friendship, a brief ceremonial exchange that would symbolize the bond between the two nations. Catherine's immediate acceptance of this invitation surprised even those who knew her well. Without hesitation, she agreed to learn the traditional movements, despite having no prior knowledge of Korean ceremonial customs. Her willingness to step outside her comfort zone in service of international friendship demonstrated exactly the kind of personal diplomacy that had made her such an effective royal representative. King Charles III and Prince William watched with obvious admiration as Catherine prepared to participate in the cultural ceremony. Their presence lent additional weight to the moment, showing the Korean guests that the entire royal family valued their traditions and friendship. The Korean president, initially concerned that his young cultural representative might be overstepping diplomatic boundaries, soon realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful. Following the young woman's gentle guidance, Catherine learned to perform a traditional Korean greeting that involved precise hand movements and bowing that conveyed respect and friendship. The Korean guests provided encouraging murmurs and gentle corrections, creating an atmosphere of supportive learning that made the complex cultural exchange feel natural and joyful. As Catherine mastered the ceremonial movements, something remarkable happened. Other guests, both British and Korean, began applauding not just the performance but the spirit of openness and mutual respect it represented. The moment had transcended simple cultural curiosity and become a powerful symbol of how personal connection could bridge any cultural divide. The Korean First Lady, moved to tears by Catherine's gracious participation in her country's traditions, approached to express her gratitude in both Korean and English. Her emotional response conveyed far more than words could express about the significance of what they had all witnessed. This was diplomacy at its most human level, where protocol gave way to genuine emotion and authentic connection. Prince William, recognizing the historical significance of the moment, stepped forward to participate in the ceremony himself. His willingness to follow Catherine's lead demonstrated the unified approach that made the royal family such effective representatives of British values. King Charles III soon joined them, creating an unprecedented scene of senior British royals learning and honoring Korean cultural traditions. The palace photographers, initially uncertain whether to document such an informal departure from standard protocol, received subtle signals from senior courtiers that these were exactly the images that should be preserved. The photographs would later become iconic representations of modern royal diplomacy, showing how genuine human connection could enhance rather than diminish royal dignity. The Korean delegation's response to this unexpected cultural exchange exceeded all diplomatic expectations. Representatives who had arrived with carefully prepared talking points found themselves engaged in spontaneous expressions of gratitude and friendship that came straight from the heart. The formal goals of the state visit had been achieved within the first hour. What was happening now was creating bonds that would last for generations. As the ceremony concluded, Catherine found herself surrounded by Korean guests eager to share their own cultural traditions and express their appreciation for her openness to learning. The conversations that followed covered everything from traditional music and dance to contemporary Korean innovations in technology and design. Each exchange deepened the connections that had begun during dinner and were now blossoming into genuine friendships. The evening's success was evident not just in the warm atmosphere, but in the substantive commitments being made for future collaboration. Business leaders were exchanging contact information and discussing specific projects, while academics were planning research partnerships and student exchanges. The personal connections established through cultural exchange were translating into practical outcomes that would benefit both nations. King Charles III, observing the remarkable scene developing around his daughter-in-law, felt profound satisfaction at how the evening had evolved beyond his highest expectations. The combination of traditional royal hospitality with Catherine's natural gift for human connection had created something truly special. This was exactly what modern monarchy should accomplish, bridging differences through authentic engagement while maintaining the dignity that made royal occasions meaningful. The Korean president, In a spontaneous moment that would be remembered long after the formal elements of the visit were forgotten, approached the three royals to express his personal gratitude for the warmth they had shown his delegation. His impromptu remarks, delivered without prepared notes, but with obvious sincerity, praised Catherine specifically for her role in making Korean guests feel genuinely welcomed and valued. As the evening began to wind down, guests lingered far longer than typical protocol would suggest, reluctant to end an experience that had exceeded everyone's expectations. The Korean delegates were particularly effusive in their praise for British hospitality, but their comments focused less on the magnificent surroundings and excellent food than on the personal connections they had formed and the genuine respect they had felt for their cultural traditions. Catherine's moment of stealing the spotlight had occurred not through any planned dramatic gesture, but through her authentic willingness to learn, participate, and connect with guests from a different culture. Her natural warmth and genuine curiosity had transformed a formal diplomatic occasion into a celebration of human connection that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The photographs and videos captured that evening would indeed circulate around the world, but their impact went far beyond mere publicity. They became symbols of how effective diplomacy could be when personal authenticity enhanced rather than replaced formal protocol. Catherine had demonstrated that modern royal duties could honor tradition while embracing innovation and change. As the final guests departed Buckingham Palace in the early hours of the morning, palace staff began the process of clearing and cleaning, but many paused to share their own observations about the extraordinary evening they had witnessed. Veterans of dozens of state banquets agreed they had never seen anything quite like the spontaneous cultural exchange that had captured everyone's hearts. The next morning's newspaper headlines and social media coverage would focus on Catherine's gracious participation in Korean cultural traditions, but those who had been present understood they had witnessed something far more significant. They had seen how genuine human connection could transform diplomatic necessity into lasting friendship, and how personal warmth could enhance rather than diminish royal dignity. Catherine's ability to steal the spotlight had come not from seeking attention, but from her authentic interest in others and her willingness to step outside her comfort zone in service of international friendship. The evening had demonstrated that the most memorable royal moments often arose from spontaneous gestures of respect and curiosity rather than carefully choreographed displays of grandeur. The success of the state banquet would be measured not just in the formal agreements signed and diplomatic protocols observed, but in the human connections formed and the mutual respect established. Catherine's role in creating these connections had elevated the entire occasion from diplomatic duty to genuine celebration, proving once again that authentic human warmth remained the most powerful tool of international diplomacy.